Hi, buddy. Welcome to Talking Automotive with Mark and John. My name is John Sinclair and my co-host Mark Palavestra.
Hi, John. Today we've got something different for Talking Automotive. We go back to the roots of the auto industry, and we've got Silvio Barbisan, who is an automotive enthusiast, a member of the Monaro Car Club, and the owner of 10 vehicles. And we deep dive into what makes an auto enthusiast, what makes a Monaro enthusiast, and how do you feel if you've been so passionate about a brand and that brand leaves your country like Holden has, and then what do you buy afterwards?
Yeah, he also gets into how a young enthusiast who's very interested and passionate about cars can get in and start to become an enthusiast, and how he needs to go about that. So a fantastic listen.
If you like what you hear today, please subscribe to the show below, like us on YouTube and LinkedIn, and follow us on LinkedIn, subscribe to Spotify and iTunes. And look out for us on our website at autocurrents.com.
So let's jump into it.
With 30 years' experience in auto logistics and state-of-the-art locations in 5 major Australian cities, Precar Fleet Services is an independent division of Precar Services, offering specialty fleet fit-outs for commercial applications ranging from simple tray and tow bar fitments to fully bespoke service body and accessory installation. With quality assured safety, compliance and standardisation of vehicle builds, Precar Fleet Services are a premier all-in-one solutions provider for commercial vehicle fleet operators, leasing companies and original equipment manufacturers. For further information on how Precar Fleet Services can assist in solving your commercial vehicle fit-out needs, please visit precar.com.au and click on the link to Fleet Services.
Fleet managers and their drivers are often lost when it comes to motor vehicle accidents, and knowing what the next steps are can be confusing. We hold your driver's hand every step of the process. At Innovation Group, we process claims right the first time. Innovation Group provides motor claims management, assessing, and accident management services. Our experienced team of people are there to make it easier for the fleet manager and the driver by minimizing touch points between all stakeholders. Innovation Group, leaders in motor accident claims management.
Hi, Silvio. Welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us. Great to have you on. Maybe just to kick things off, can you tell us why you like cars and what a car enthusiast is?
Possibly goes back to early childhood. I grew up on a farm, on a tobacco farm. And so I was constantly surrounded by machinery. So tractors and all sorts of bits and pieces. And I was always following my father around. He was constantly fixing all sorts of mechanical things. So, tractors and plows and whatever. So from an early age, I was always surrounded by cars and farm machinery, and was even at an early age, I think I started driving a tractor at the age of 7. My dad said to me, you jumped on the tractor and you had to both feet on the clutch, jump on it and put it in gear and then take off. And I didn't even remember that, but he told me about it. It wasn't that long ago, actually. So always having the hands on, working on something mechanical just sort of sparked that interest. And so I just love tinkering with anything mechanical.
And what is it about cars that makes it special? Like, why didn't you just get into tractors or motorbikes? What is it about cars that makes, because we're trying to get an understanding of what makes a car enthusiast?
I suppose it's like, you see a lot of people, they look at a car and they look at it as just a mode of transport to get from point A to point B. I look at it as, yes, it's a mode of transport, but it's also the enjoyment of getting from point A to point B in a way that you want to, but also the sound, the feel. For me, there's nothing more invigorating than the sound of a throaty V8. Even at my age now, I tend to almost get myself in trouble, because I just want to put the foot down. So it's just that enjoyment of driving around in a car that looks good, feels good, but also that you have so many options with cars. You can customize it. You can personalize the vehicle to how you want it to look. And there's so many different paths to go down. And so it's just lots of imagination going wild. I can remember in my teens thinking of all sorts of harebrained schemes of what to put in a car, to add on accessories. But also one thing that I did like, there was a there was a cartoon I used to watch when I was young called Speed Racer. I used to come home from school, sit down and I'll watch this cartoon. And it's a Japanese manga, but it was called Speed Racer. And it was all about the race car with gadgets. And there were all sorts of accessories. So little wings that popped out, or these little treads that would come on the tyres for grip, or jacks that would jack the car up, and just all sorts of little gizmos. And I really liked it. It sort of struck a chord with me. So it just kept going from there. So the more I got involved, I got into motorbikes, and then just wanted to tinker and modify and build. I used to modify push bikes. So it was just always getting my hands into, with the tools and modifying something.
So Silvio, with that early childhood engagement with cars, motorbikes and fixing things, you then start to buy cars. So let's talk about current state, and then I want to go back and find out a bit more of back into that history. So how many cars do you currently have, and then how many cars have you had over the journey?
Currently, I have about 10 cars.
Wow. What's the composition of that 10-car fleet?
Okay, well, I actually sat down and wrote them down because I thought I'd better make a list because you asked the question. I have a HG GTS Monaro. I've got a HX GTS Monaro. I have an 81 Daimler Sovereign, which now runs a Holden V8 and 4-speed auto. I've got a 99 VT Calais V6, a 99 Statesman V6 supercharged, 2017 VF SSV Redline, 2013 Renault Megane GT220, 2017 Mazda 6 Akira, which is what Simone drives. I also have a HX Ute, a 64 Hillman Minx, and I've got a HG Wagon Shell that I want to make a project out of.
Wow, there definitely is a theme there as far as a lot of Holden product. If we look at it from the HG through to the Js, the Xs, to the Commodores, to the Calais, to the Statesman. You've got a Hillman, which goes back to even the earlier days, and you've got a Mazda, and you've got a Renault in there. But it's funny, the Renault still is a GT.
Yes.
So there is this GT something theme all the way through that ties back into the speed racer thing. That's interesting. Now, Monaro, there's a theme there with Monaro. So what does the word Monaro, or the brand and the car Monaro, mean to you?
Well, it's funny because my very first car was the HG Monaro. It was the very first car that I bought, and it was purely by accident. There's a bit of a story behind it. It was very much an accident in how I bought this car, because at the time I had my license. I wanted to get my own car, so I'm looking for a car, and I knew what I wanted. I wanted a V8 and I wanted a manual. That was my criteria, and I was looking at the time for HQs. I thought I'll get a HQ sedan with a V8, and that was pretty much what I was looking for. So I was going to Wodonga and Albury, and I'm looking around, I'm checking cars out. And at that time, this is back in 1984. So at that time, they were going for $2,500, $3,000, these were like HQ Kingswoods and HJ Kingswoods, nothing special. And then I saw advertised the HG. And I remember asking Gino at the time, I said, Gino, because I wasn't that fluent on the cars. And I said, my uncle Gino, I said, look, what's this car? It's a HG, but what I liked, it had 253, 4-speed, and it had GTS. And I didn't quite understand exactly what that meant at the time. And he goes, it's got all the gauges and it's got all these extra things. And I thought, well, I like the 4-speed and I like the V8. I basically went to have a look at it and bought it, and I paid $1,800 for it.
Oh, that's outrageous.
So I paid $1,800 with a roadworthy for a HG GTS Monaro back in 1984. Now, admittedly, it was a bit tired, the engine. It hadn't been well looked after or serviced properly because it was a bit smoky. And I actually said to the guy, I said, mate, when's the last time you serviced it? And he goes, no, I just top it up with oil. So as a result, many years later, when I tore that engine down, it was full of sludge. Very, very, very dirty inside. The lesson about changing your oil, you've got to do it.
So now you've got a collection of Monaros and a collection of Holdens. So where did the love affair with Monaro, was that the starting point, or how did it grow?
The Monaro came off the road in 1987. That's its last registration. At the time, I was quite broke, to be honest, and I almost was going to sell the car, but it was attracting so little value at the time that I thought there's no point in me selling it. So the car got put off the road. I got a canary by a fantastic police officer in Mini Ponds. And he said to me, I want that car off the road. He didn't care that it was my only mode of transport. I thought, okay, thanks. Thank you very much. I took the car to Myrtleford, put it in Dad's shed, and there it sat for 20 years. I just left it there. I didn't want to sell it. I started pulling it apart with the intention of rebuilding it. And 20 years passed with the blink of an eye. All sorts of things were going on. So the passion for Monaros didn't really start until I started rebuilding it. And that's when I really started getting enthusiastic about it. So in between getting that car back on the road, I had a HG Kingswood that I modified and did up. So it was a Kingswood with a 186S motor, Aussie 4-speed, mag wheels, had lowered, all done up. Then I sold that. Then I had a HQ Kingswood wagon. And then I put the V8 in it with aircon and power steering and did all that up. And that was a great car. Had it for many, many years. But then I sold that. So then I had a HQ LS Monaro. It was a 1973 model, low kilometres, only had 60,000 Ks on it. The 6-cylinder factory T-bar auto, which most of them were column shift, factory delete vinyl roof in a champagne paint with chocolate brown interior. Really, really nice car. It drove like a brand new car. It was that good. The doors were mint. They closed like it was a brand new car. It was amazing, this car. But fell on hard times and had to let that one go, which didn't sell for very much. I think I ended up selling that for about $5,000 back in 2002. I think I sold that, which was there's a few cars I regret selling. That was one of them.
Now, Silvio, you've seen Holden leave the market. What has the Holden brand meant to you?
I suppose it instills a little bit of pride that it's a locally built car. And when you consider, you look at the engineering of these cars going back in the 60s and 70s, I look at my HG, and that is a car that was built for Australia. You can drive that thing right around this country and it will get you there. It will not stop. And I can actually say that it does that because in 2012, I drove my HG across the Nullarbor to Perth, and it literally did not skip a beat. While there were cars on the side of the road broken down, I was cruising past in my HG without a care in the world. It did it with ease. I could have done it all day long. It was some days were like nearly 40-degree days, and I'm just driving like normal, not a problem. Didn't flinch.
And why did you drive it across the Nullarbor?
I went to the Monaro Nationals in Busselton. So we made a trip out of it. It took us a week to get there, just about. We were going to the Monaro Nationals. So I went with a friend of mine. He drove his HK Monaro, and it's quite a story because it was a real adventure. We would leave as the sun rose and not too early because we didn't want the roadkill. And as it turned out, it was the best thing we ever did because during the night, the amount of trucks that would run over wombats, emus, kangaroos, it was just, the road was littered. It was a chicane going around roadkill. There was that much of it. And then we would stop before it got dark. Well before, and then stay over in a hotel for the night. But yeah, we went to the Monaro Nationals, and I just finished rebuilding the car 3 weeks before. So the car was fresh. It had only probably had 1,000 Ks on it, not even, had 500 Ks on it. And we filled it up and drove all the way across the Nullarbor.
So you're very proud to do a very Australian thing in an Australian car that you had rebuilt yourself. So the Australian DNA, but you've got your DNA over it. How did you feel when Holden pulled out of Australia?
To be honest, I was a bit angry because obviously decisions weren't made here. They were made in a GM head office. It's in a way they took something away from us. They took away our car, our brand, our Holden brand, and especially at a time when At that time, Holden was building one of the best cars they'd ever built. The VF is one of the best Holdens ever produced. Hands down, it is an amazing car. And you can see where they really put the effort into that car. It drives fantastic. It handles brilliantly. It's got killer power. Like, it is just an absolute rocket of a car. The car goes faster than you can hold on to it. It can go around corners faster than you can hold on to it. It's an amazing car. The only way to get the full potential out of that car is you've got to put a racing harness in it, because it's that quick and handles that well.
So what did the brand mean to you? So it was Australian, it's gone. You said you felt angry that they'd taken something away from you. Now, you've bought a number of new Holdens over your career. You started with used Monaros, and you mentioned the later versions there, the Calais, the Statesman, and the Redline.
The current Redline I've got is the second Redline that I bought new. I started in 2011, I bought my first brand new Commodore. And then I started turning them over. So I bought new, traded in, bought new, trade in. It's funny because the current Redline that I've got, you can laugh, I went into the dealership to buy a set of floor mats for my Series 1 Redline, which was a 6-litre Redline, and walked out with the brand new Series 2 Redline. September 2017, I went into the dealership and I said, oh, look, do you have any Redlines left? Or, because at that stage I'd stopped production for 2 months. And he goes, oh, let's have a look at what's in stock. And he goes, oh, yeah, we've got 2 white wagons. And I'll go, okay. And I thought, all right, time for a trade up. Did the deal and signed off on it on that day, and then walked back into the spares parts and said, oh, I just want to give you these back and get a refund. And the guy said, why is that? He goes, because I just bought a new car. He nearly cried laughing.
Silvio, going forward, you mentioned you bought the Renault. With Holden now gone, have you had any thoughts about what you'll buy in the future, or particular brand, or have you not thought much about that?
The problem I have with the Holden brand being axed in Australia is that the Commodore is a very unique car worldwide. In my opinion, it's left a gap in the market because it is a large passenger vehicle, V8, rear-wheel drive, that is quite robust and strong. There's not many cars that fill that criteria at a decent price range. Sure, you can buy Mercedes and BMWs, you can buy Audis, you can buy all those expensive European cars, but they're very expensive. And I'm not really a fan of buying American-built cars because, in my opinion, they're quite poorly built. The quality control on the American-made vehicles is absolute garbage. Our Commodore, the VF Commodores that were being built here, were 10 times better built than anything that was coming out of GM or Ford or Chrysler from the US. Quality of what we were producing here towards the end was absolutely world standard. And it's, in my opinion, it's an absolute travesty that executives from GM, with absolutely no foresight or ability to even manage what Australians wanted, because at the end of the day, they kept shoveling cars down our throat that really weren't what we wanted here. But it's what they wanted to throw at us because they said, oh, we'll just give it to them. It's only a small, pissy little country that's right-hand drive. Why do we want to put the effort into them? That's how it felt to me. Whereas instead now, could you imagine with the shortage of cars we have at the moment, had we been manufacturing, they would have been selling more Holdens than they could have made. They would have been working around the shift.
You raise a very good point. We've spoken about that actually, John, on this show. The differences between the GFC and COVID. When the GFC was around, we actually had 3 car manufacturing plants operating, Toyota, Ford and Holden. So when we came out of GFC, the local factories just ramped up and we had very short lead times and we filled the void in the market very quickly, which is why there was that rebound back in 2010 that was quite strong. Whereas we're not seeing that this time because the lead times are so long and all the other overseas factories have shut, and now there's a silicon chip / semiconductor shortage. there is the supply lines and the catch up is taking that much longer. It's 18 months to 2 years to catch up for that shock. But yeah, you raise a good point there, Silvio, that if the local manufacturers were still around, we wouldn't have that situation, and we'd have a lot of fresh, locally made vehicles and some really good local suppliers contributing to the economy and in and out of lockdowns.
Well, that's right. So, I mean, even going back to the point you raised before, the question you raised before about now that there's no Holdens, what will I buy? What will be my next vehicle? And it's something that I've sort of started to think about, because what I want, I can't get anymore. What I want is a VF Redline. I can't get them anymore. They're not making them anymore. What will I replace it with? And the thing is, like I said before, I won't go to an American-built product because their quality is not there. And I think it's overpriced for what they are. I now have to start looking at different brands. And I've got to go through that whole rigmarole of trying to work out, what do I really want as a replacement vehicle when the time comes? I've already made the decision that I will be keeping my Redline. I won't get rid of it. And I'm also a true believer that the cars are meant to be driven. So I've had so many people say to me, oh, don't drive your Redline, put it in the shed, don't drive it. And to me, it's like, well, having a great car and not driving it, you know what I mean? It's pointless. How many people have gone to the grave with beautiful cars that they haven't enjoyed? So I drive my cars. I take my HG out all the time when I can't at the moment, but it didn't matter if it was raining, if it was sunshine, I didn't care. I just drove it when I wanted to drive it. So it doesn't bother me. The cars are meant to be driven. They got wipers for a reason. So you can drive them in the rain. They got headlights for a reason. You can drive them at night. So I want to enjoy the cars. I enjoy driving the cars. In saying that too, the HG is a bit like driving a tractor. Doesn't handle that good. Doesn't stop that well. You've really got to hold on to it. If you get a little bit loose in the wet, you know about it in a HG Monaro, that's for sure.
So, Silvio, what will you buy as your next car? European? Is it going to be Asian? You've said not American. What would it be?
The only reason I won't buy American is, in some way, I'm still pissed off at them because they've killed off our brand. They didn't even try to sell it. They just shut it down. Absolute travesty. Why didn't they sell the brand off? Someone else would have bought it and they could have kept it going. I know. They just closed the doors. And mind you, there's a lot of stuff that they're making that I'm not really liking anyway. Going back to possibly a European style car. Now, I've thought about, there's some nice sort of Japanese and Korean made cars. And I've thought about some of those cars, but possibly, I'm looking at maybe stepping up to a Mercedes, a V8 Mercedes or something like that. So, but mind you, that's going to get harder and harder to get new because now everyone's going towards electric cars, and I just want something that I'll put fuel into and drive. A nice bi-turbo Mercedes, V8 Mercedes would be good. That'd have a bit of grunt under the foot. Maybe even a V12 Mercedes. I don't know. There's a lot of options there in the German market.
Now, Silvio, in terms of having so many cars, what's your expectation of the manufacturer and the dealer, especially that Holden's gone? Where do you service those cars?
I actually do a lot of the servicing myself. So all the older cars, I don't take them to mechanical dealers. I'm fortunate enough that I now have pretty much a full workshop, including the hoist and tools and everything I need. I can actually do most of the mechanical work myself. I don't really need to take it out to a mechanical dealer anymore. There's some things that I still do. So, for example, the Renault is clocked up 100,000. It's going in to get its timing belt replaced. And I thought about doing that myself, but I thought it's a very specialist job and it's a very time-consuming task. So I've taken that to the Renault dealer and I'm letting them do that. I did have the option to take it to a standard mechanic, but I thought if I take it to the Renault dealer, hopefully, and my expectation is that they are trained and experts in that engine and can give it back to me 100% without any issues. And that's my expectation, that if I go to a dealer and I'm paying a premium to go to a dealer, that they give me the car back like it was new. That's my expectation. So the last thing I want when I go to a dealer is to be ripped off. And unfortunately, in my opinion, they charge far too much for standard servicing. A lot of brands that charge a lot. And also to be treated with respect at a dealership too. I've had many experiences with dealers where they treat you like an idiot, and especially if you send your wife there. Anybody should be able to go to a dealership and be treated with respect and also not be ripped off. But on the other side too, parts. You want to fit genuine parts to your car. So when you're doing repairs, you want to be able to fit genuine parts. Now, if I can share the story, on the Renault, on the Megane, it's got a clutch return spring that's broken, and it fits onto the pedal box on the pedal, and it just pushes the pedal all the way up from its resting position. So it's probably 2 centimetre gap. Now, it's got a broken spring. I called up spare parts and I asked them for that little assembly or just the spring, and I got told that they do not sell the parts individually, and the only option they have is to sell an entire pedal box with the pedal and assembly at $900 for a $5 spring. That is the problem I have with manufacturers, that they want to dictate to us what we can and can't get and what parts they will sell to us. And I find that ridiculous. The cost of spare parts from a dealer, from the original manufacturer, that they seem to try to make up their shortfalls by stitching you up in the spare parts division. You end up then start searching elsewhere for your parts. So you'll go to Repco or to whatever. And there's some things I even engineered myself to repair. So with the example of the Renault, I will go to a spring manufacturer and I will source a replacement spring that will do exactly the same job. And it will not cost me $900. I'll be lucky to pay more than $10 for it. I have the ability to do that, and I can work on the car and fix it and I can do it. But there's a lot of people who can't. So you then look at the people that don't have that choice, who don't have the ability to work on the car themselves, don't have the space or the tools, or even just the mechanical nous, that then take their car to a dealer and say, I want this fixed. And the dealer's saying, well, that's going to cost you $900 in parts for a $5 spring. That's the problem I have. And my expectation is that you as a customer be treated with a little bit more respect than just be treated as a cash cow.
Some very profound points there.
So, Silvio, one last question for me, but I was just wondering, for a young guy watching the show who's thinking of getting interested in cars and wanting to start off as an enthusiast, what advice would you give him? How should he go about starting?
I think that for anyone that's young and enthusiastic and wants to get into working on cars, it comes down to, part of it's going to be affordability, because there's lots of cars young people would like to buy, but some of the prices are outrageous. And I think that's a real shame, because it's cutting off at the knees the young enthusiast's ability to buy the cars that I could buy. So if they're wanting to get into cars, there's a lot of cars that you can buy and play with that are cheap. And because when you're young, you're not loaded with cash. So you may have to settle for something that's not quite what you want, but it gives you the ability to work on it, to play with it, to modify it, to repair it or whatever. And so don't get stuck on brands, because as you can see, I've got a lot of different makes and models of cars. I like everything. I like every different brand. It doesn't matter what it is. Some I'm not that particularly enthusiastic about. There's always something you can do with a car. I've seen so many examples of vehicles which have had complete engine swaps done to them that you would never even think to do. I saw one last week. I think it was a 1978 Toyota Crown with a Gen 3 V8 put into it. Now, who would have thought to do that? And there's a lot of women that are getting into cars as well. They're really getting excited about cars, which is great. Everyone's should have the same opportunity. It doesn't matter what gender you are. There's a lot of women that are getting into cars. I knew a fair few women over the years that had some really nice cars. I remember one that I worked with. She owned a Pontiac Trans Am, and she was cruising around in that. And she had a list of cars that she had modified. She had a 240Z with a 327 Chev in it. If you want to get into cars, you find something that gets you excited, type of car, a brand, it doesn't matter what it is. At the end of the day, if that's your passion, that's your passion. If that's what you like, I like Holdens. but I like all cars, but I particularly like Holdens. That's just me. There are people out there that it's Ford people. There's Chrysler people. There's all different, all different people out there who like different cars. You find something you like, and then you pursue it. It's true though, because I've met lots of young people that were enthusiastic, and some of them, they tend to get, ribbed about their choices. They get teased about their choices. I remember when I was in Warrandyte, there was one guy living across the road, and he had a little MG, and he loved this little MG, and everyone was giving him shit about it. His parents were saying, "Oh, you bought a heap of rubbish," and because it was an older car and it needed a bit of work done to it, needed a bit of love applied to it. And he came over to me and he said, "Look, copping a bit of stick about the car." And I said, "Look, if this is your passion, if this is what you like, don't listen to all the naysayers. Don't listen to all the other people out there that want to put you down and give you a hard time about it, because it usually comes out of jealousy, comes out of ignorance. And at the end of the day, you're wanting to go outside of your comfort zone to do something you're not sure about, to learn about something, have a passion for something." A lot of people, they give you a hard time, are the ones that have got no passion and no vision. I applaud anyone that is willing to get their hands dirty to fix a car, and it doesn't matter what car it is. It really doesn't. And I like, sometimes the older cars have a bit more soul than the new cars. The new cars have got all the safety features and I can't discount that. They are safe. They are stable. They drive and handle fantastic. One of the things that I didn't sort of touch on was one thing that got me to the fact that I bought the HG back in the day, the very first car that I still got, was that it was a Monaro. But at the time, it didn't really resonate with me as that it was a Monaro. It's more that it was a two-door with V8 and 4-speed, 4 on the floor. That's what resonated at the time. It's only after and down as the years went past that the passion grew and grew for the brand, for the car, for the Monaro, that it kept growing. The passion kept growing for it. It's like, but even now, like I was looking at buying a CV8. And I thought I wouldn't mind buying a CV8. To me, they would like fill the stable, the old, the middle, and the new. And I started looking at the prices of CV8s. I'm thinking, nah, CV8s are basically two-door Commodores from 2002. They've got the same issues as Commodores of that age. You can go buy a four-door Commodore, 2002, you're paying $3,000-$4,000 for them, for a half decent one. Yet these people are asking $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 for these CV8s, and a lot of them with 150,000, 200,000 Ks on it. And when you've got 200,000 Ks on one of those Monaros, you've got the interior falling apart, the seats break down. If they haven't looked after the engine properly, they're not going to be that great. They'll be rattly. They'll be ready to throw a leg out. I know all the problems with those cars. The suspension falls apart because that's how they were at the time. So when they start asking outrageous money for a car you pretty much have to restore, I don't see the value in it. And that's what happens. A lot of people, they buy with passion without understanding what goes into rebuilding a car. And so you even get people buying, rusted out KTG Monaros, spending $50,000 to buy an absolute basket case, who then have to spend another $100,000 on top of that to restore it, because absolutely everything's got to be rebuilt and redone. The bodywork alone can cost you $40,000, $50,000. I know a guy who spent $40,000 at the panel shop getting everything fixed on the body and painted. It's a lot of money. When I rebuilt my HG, all up, I spent in total $30,000 in total from start to finish. That's panel beating, painting, engine, all the mechanicals rebuilt, all the interior done, everything, glass, everything. The car is now 100% original, and I spent less than $30,000 to do it.
Well, thanks, Silvio, for sharing your story. It's a fascinating one, and it's one that it's great to actually get down and granular as to the origins of what makes a car enthusiast. And I've never thought of it, but you actually are very profound in what you've just shared with us, because it's almost like we're having an interview with a psychologist. And it's like, tell me about your childhood, because the automotive passion comes out as a kid. being on the farm, surrounded by machinery, following your father around and getting him to get you to put both feet on the clutch to push it in so that you could select the gear and then have the clutch throw you off and then the thing takes off and drives away. But then when you talked about what makes you an enthusiast and the input from the Speed Racer cartoon and the opportunity to accessorize and customize and have this thing meet your personality, because you talk about cars as being transport. If growing up on a farm, you have to have some transport, and you started with bikes and that progressed into cars. But then you talked about the transport couldn't just be, it's not just transport. It's something where you needed to enjoying the sound and the feel. They're two words that you kept coming back to. It's sound and feel. But then you talked about looking good and feeling good in the car. And this is where the opportunity to customize came into play. But then when you looked at how many cars you've got, like currently you've got 10 cars, but you've had a wide number of cars through your ownership cycle, and you're still going to be buying new cars continuing going forward. And we'll get to that in a minute as to, well, what do you buy now that Holden is gone? But when we look at Monaro then means something super special to you, because it's actually a couple of things. You said you loved Holden because Holden was an Australian brand. It was the pride of the locally built car, engineered and built for Australia. And the pride that you had in having what was their best ever and flagship car when you look at the Holden portfolio was the Monaro. And the Monaro with the high watermark really was the HG G and K, because they're the ones that really made the statement and made Monaro what it was and really put Holden on the map from a muscle car perspective. And you stole it for $1,800 at the time, which is incredible. But when you think of when Holden left, you were shocked. But then you said you were angry because they took something away from you. The words you used were, they took away our car and our brand, and they left a gap. So there's a hole in the market, but there's actually a hole in the consumer's feeling towards a vehicle, because you're talking about enthusiasts, not the A to B transport people. So how does the market fill that hole, and who's going to take advantage of that, and who's going to win out of that? You mentioned you looked at the Koreans, you looked at the Japanese, and yeah, there's some nice products there, but you tend to be leaning, and you looked at the Americans and you said, no, thank you, for all the reasons you've outlined. So you've now pretty much mentioned that European's the way to go, and the Europeans will win your business in some way, shape, or form. So do you feel that's the case of your cohort that you're talking to, the cohort in your club, in your circle of social gatherings with people that were similar to you? That's something to consider. Now, but then you also talk about you have the ability to fix vehicles yourself, and you're talking about your expectations of the industry. What do you expect of the OEMs, the manufacturers, and what do you expect from their representatives, which are the dealers who provide the interface between you and the manufacturer? So you're very self-sufficient, you're very hands-on all the way through your early journey from childhood to now. So you've got all the tech gear, but you still have standards and expectations. And for example, you're getting your Renault, the 100,000K service is being performed because your expectation is that you'll be treated with respect, not be ripped off. Genuine parts is what you value because you want to keep the car in the best condition possible, but you expect that the technicians are trained to the highest standard to be able to repair and maintain those vehicles that you invest heavily in. There's a fair journey there, and we really appreciate you sharing your story, which is no doubt very similar to most enthusiasts, similar to yourself, where that passion for the brands that they follow, in your case it's Holden or the GM portfolio, but also the critical ones of expectation of dealers, car companies, and what you expect to be, how you expect to be treated, and where you plan to go in the future. I thank you for coming on the show, Silvio, and sharing your story, and hopefully the listeners got as much out of this as John and I did, because that's a fascinating story.
Yeah, thanks very much, Silvio. Really enjoyed that discussion.
No, you're welcome. Not a problem.
Thanks for listening today. Hopefully you enjoyed the conversation with Silvio as much as John and I did. Silvio covered off what it means to be an motoring enthusiast, how to have a 10-car collection, and what his expectations and how he felt about Holden's departure out of the Australian market, and then what he expects dealers and their service departments and parts departments to provide as a service to him.
Now, if you enjoyed what you heard, hit the bell below and subscribe to the channel. Follow us on LinkedIn. We're also available on iTunes and Spotify. And thanks very much for listening.